So real quick, I'm gonna go over our deadlift progression. 9 times out of 10, when someone comes into the gym, we're gonna start them on an elevated kettlebell deadlift. When we coach someone on an elevated kettlebell deadlift, they're gonna step directly over the kettlebell, and what we want them to do is get their hands around the horns of the bell, but only as a byproduct of her hips moving back. So Jacqueline's gonna stand nice and tall. She's gonna shift her hips back, and she's gonna keep shifting those hips back till she can grip that kettlebell as hard as she can. A couple things we're looking for. We want the shoulders higher than the hips, the femur angle or the thigh angle almost at like a 45-degree angle, and then the shins are gonna be relatively vertical. You can stand back up, all right? Another thing we coach with all of the deadlifts, we coach them all as a push. So a lot of people will coach them as a pull. We like to coach everyone that comes here to kind of think about pushing the floor away. So even with the kettlebell deadlift, again, Jacqueline's gonna stand directly over that kettlebell. She's gonna shift her hips back, keep her arms nice and long, and then she's going to push the floor away and finish tall and tight. All right, so we're looking for a nice neutral spine, nice straight line from the top of the head to the tailbone, femur angle at about 45 degrees, a fairly vertical shin, and that's gonna set us up pretty nicely for a deadlift. A couple things we also wanna look for is we wanna make sure that they're not obviously like excessively rounding, kind of looking like a Quasimodo, and we also wanna make sure they're not arching extra hard. So we wanna focus to have people on keeping like a very stacked position. And when we say stacked, that's just gonna be rib cage, maintaining over the pelvis throughout the entire movement. You can also kind of pretend that they have a line at their sternum and then at their belly button, and you don't really want that line to either go to open up or to close too much. We want to find like a nice neutral position for people, and everyone's going to be different. Neutral is different for everybody. But again, the principles for the deadlift, regardless of it's a trap bar or a barbell, is it's going to be a relatively vertical shin, maximum hip flexion, and then we're just going to finish tall and tight. So shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, everything is stacked, and then in the starting position, shoulders are higher than the hips. Once they've mastered a kettlebell deadlift, we can obviously go to the floor. So let's move this real quick. So we'll go to the floor, and the same rules apply. We're looking for a relatively vertical shin. The femur angle is gonna be at about a 45-degree angle, give or take, and then shoulders are gonna be higher than the hips, and then we're gonna push the floor and stand up nice and tall and tight. Let's go one more. Perfect. All right, good. Once someone has mastered that, another thing we could do is if they're really comfortable doing kettlebell deadlifts, another thing we can do is we can just simply have them go a little bit wider with their feet. That's gonna also reduce the range of motion. So go ahead and try that. So we're gonna go wider with Jacqueline's feet. It's gonna emulate a little bit more of like a sumo deadlift, and sort of the same rules are gonna apply. We're gonna shift those hips back a little bit. We're gonna keep a vertical shin somewhat, and then we're gonna push the floor away and finish tall and tight, all right? But again, we really wanna focus on keeping those feet directly underneath the hips. General rule of thumb is if someone is having a hard time finding their stance, just kinda ask them where they put their feet if they were gonna jump. Once they've mastered a kettlebell deadlift, all the other options are available. They can go trap bar deadlift, they can go conventional deadlift, they can go barbell, RDL. We're gonna go over all three really quick. So first, we're gonna go over the trap bar. The trap bar, they're gonna stand in the middle of the bar. You want the axle of the bar in line with their shins. And then it's the same thing, same rules apply. We're gonna push those hips back to get our hands around the barbell. And then Jacqueline's gonna push the floor away and stand up tall and tight. All right, shift our hips back to return the bar to the starting position. So when we're deadlifting, we always wanna put the bar down the same exact way we pick it up. Perfect. Trap bar deadlift is a good variation. A lot of people will find this a little bit more comfortable because instead of the weight being out in front of them, the weight is gonna be out to the side of them, and it's just gonna be a little bit more friendly in terms of like finding their center of mass and things like that. And it also is just gonna, some people find it a little bit more comfortable because they're grabbing here and not out here. Then with a conventional deadlift, we're gonna have them stand. It's gonna be different for everybody, but we're gonna be maybe the bows of your shoelace underneath of the barbell. All right, same thing as a kettlebell deadlift. You're gonna shift your hips back to get your hands around the barbell. Keep a relatively vertical shin. You're gonna push the floor and finish tall and tight. If you're watching from the side, like the view of the camera, what we're looking for is you wanna see the armpits pretty much over the bar. Again, shoulders higher than your hips, femur at a relatively 45-degree-ish angle, and then the shins are gonna be fairly vertical. From here, Jacqueline's just gonna push the floor away, stand up, and finish tall and tight. Let's go one more time. Perfect. Another cue that we'll coach, and you can use this with every single deadlift variation. The kettlebell deadlift you can use it with, the barbell. Trap bar, this might be a little bit more challenging to articulate, but we like to tell people to keep their arms nice and far away from them. So when they're reaching for that barbell or they're going to grab that barbell, we're gonna keep your fingertips as far away from your collarbone as possible. So you're gonna actively reach, push those hips back, and then proceed with the lift. All right, so we're gonna reach nice and far, and then finish tall and tight. Again, we're thinking about pushing the floor away as opposed to pulling the weight off of the floor. Now, if we're good with the kettlebell deadlift, the trap bar deadlift, the conventional deadlift, we're gonna move to the barbell RDL. So can you throw that in the rack? More often than not, when we're training here, we want people to pull the RDL from the rack and work from the top down, all right? As far as building muscle, building strong hamstrings, and training the hips, the RDL is probably gonna be the best option, specifically because it's the only one out of the deadlift variations that have an eccentric portion. Everything else is just the concentric portion. So for the eccentric portion, the lowering part of the lift, the part that causes the most muscle damage, we're gonna focus on that. So Jacqueline's gonna unrack the bar, walk it out nice and slow. Same rules apply. We're gonna lower that barbell, but only as a byproduct of our hips moving back. We're gonna push our hips back nice and far, feel the stretch in our hamstrings, and then return back to our starting position. With the barbell RDL, we do want to see your armpits go past the bar. So we're looking for maximal hip flexion, minimal knee flexion. Try one more rep. Push your hips back, big stretch in your hamstrings and your glutes, and then finish tall and tight. It's all a hinge. It's all different ways to change the hip hinge pattern. Another cue with the barbell RDL, well, we'll go 3 cues with the barbell RDL. 1 is we like to coach people to kind of keep that bar nice and close to them and don't let it get out in front of them. 2, we like to keep people's eyeballs on the barbell. So instead of, as they're hinging back, going like this, we want a nice neutral head position and just keep a soft gaze on the bar. And then 3, what was 3? Canister. Same thing, canister position. Avoid when you're hinging back to fall into that scissored position. So we want to keep pelvis and rib cage stacked on top of one another. We're going to shift posteriorly, feel a stretch in our hamstrings and glutes, and then finish tall and tight. That is going to be basically the principles for coaching any hinge pattern at Warhorse Barbell Club. That's pretty much it.